Within the context of natural disasters, does God act as a divine watchmaker, taking a step back only in circumstances where humanity was at fault? Is that still within his sovereignty? Don't feel like you have to answer the whole question there if there's this part you want to pick out, because it is a couple questions within one.
All right, I'll jump in and then we'll let Xandra do that. A book that I read that wasn't intentionally theological on this that was really interesting for me is by a guy named John McPhee, who writes a whole lot of different books, but he wrote one called The Control of Nature. And in The Control of Nature, he looks at all of the different ways in which humanity has worked so hard to build systems to circumvent natural effects. And I mean, you could sort of summarize the book in the fact of like, if you build your house on the side of a volcano and then it burns down, can you blame God? Sort of thing. And just looking at how we build cities now in places that 200 years ago nobody would pitch a tent, or we rechannel rivers, or we build out in the coast and peninsulas, or we build on, and just looking at the world history of our kind of the the arrogance of man to say, I'm going to stick my face in this, and if it hurts, I'm going to blame God, is sort of an interesting. So there's, I think, some of that of if we were in step with God, would we necessarily need to be, fun ones in California. He looks at like landslide and home purchases in California of like, here's a house. Every 50 years, there's a landslide. The landslide comes, knocks the house off. It's gone for 5 years. Somebody buys it and builds a house. In 50 years, the landslide, it's like, there's a pattern here, people. Can we blame God for that sort of thing? So that's one of it, is just being in tune with nature. The other side of that is a comment that Fuzz Rana said recently, as he said, you would not want to live in a world where there weren't hurricanes. And that's kind of a striking statement to say, but it is also true that there are deep ecological value to some of the things that we see as a disaster because of the impact that they have on humanity. That would be, so for example, and this happens differently in different parts. In the spring where I live, we get these massively heavy thunderstorms. And sometimes there's flooding from that. But other times, what's happening there is all of the old and the dead wood from the winter is broken out of the trees, so the new growth can come out and flourish in the spring. And so that dense, heavy, storming rain is necessary for part of the way that the world is meant to replenish and grow and cycle. And so I do think that God works within natural systems, but that the way that he made the world and the complexity of the way that nutrients are cycled by storm forces and the jet stream and all of these are wonderfully beautiful things that show the intricacy of a design and the way of sustaining an earth. And so, yes, is there difficulty then when we get in the way of that? Absolutely. Are there real tragedies? Absolutely. Are there causative forces in nature that aren't good? That's a question Alvin Plantinga has asked, and I think, yeah, that's possible too. And so God can intervene in that. I don't see him as a divine watchmaker who just sets it up, spins the dice, and watches it go. I think that's the beauty of that idea of the Holy Spirit being able to work within us. I know people who have been warned of natural disasters by God in dreams and prayer and stuff like that too. So I think there are ways in which God works within the system, and it is a good one. And I'm less likely to blame. I think there's a balance. There are times in which it's humanity's fault because we're at the wrong place at the wrong time, doing the wrong thing. And you see different versions of this. If you cut down all the trees along the coast and then the storm surge takes out the hotel, how does that work? Or is that just a misunderstanding of the ecological value of how these things go? So I'm kind of giving a down the middle of the road there, but recognizing that some of the things that we see as destructive are destructive relative to what we wish they were, without taking into the full context of what it is that they're actually doing for balancing temperature and nutrients and different things in our world. Mm-hmm. Did I get that close to right from the meta view?
Yeah, it sounded great to me. So stamp of approval.
That's not very
says
affirming.
The biologist, not my forte. But yeah, I mean, I guess on the line of disasters and the brokenness that we see in the natural world, this is something that has disturbed me from the time I just started off in biology. You see all sorts of things in the natural world that seem very broken, very wrong, and you have to ask, is this, how did this happen? And I think obviously that goes back to the fall, back to Eden, and the fact that when sin entered this world, it affected the natural world. So the Christian narrative is that the natural world as it is now is not how it was meant to be, but one day these things will be put right. And I was talking with a friend of mine called AJ Roberts, who lives in California. I was messaging her today. She's a virologist. She studies viruses. And we were just talking about the fact that the vast majority of viruses are so good, and we would not have life on this planet if we didn't have them. We wouldn't have rain on this planet if we didn't have them. Our ocean cycles would not be the same, and we wouldn't be able to exist, right, without them. And so I said, well, AJ, how many are actually bad? And she said, a fraction of a percent. Mathematically, they're negligible. But then she said something really interesting. But she said, but every human life that is affected by that breaks God's heart. So even though mathematically these things are negligible, when things go bad in nature, they go very, very bad. And just to say that, our God is not a God who takes a step back in any circumstance. He is the God who takes a step towards us, especially in times of suffering. The Psalms say that he is near to the brokenhearted, right? He restores the crushed in spirit. And in Jeremiah, he says, because the heart of my daughter is broken, my heart is also broken. So he's a God of compassion who reaches out to us in times of disaster and distress.
And I would just say that's a great ending to that I think in some of these, I don't always know why, but I do know how God asks me to respond to the hurting. And so don't let the big question distract you from the practical element of what needs to be done. I don't know why this happened, but I do know what my response is supposed to be. And so I think that maybe then brings it back down to even on the broader theme of, I think that's where I want to live too. I want to be mindful because I'm a disciple of Jesus and I want to bring every thought to conformity and I want to live a life of integrity where all the pieces do fit together in a real way. I want to be mindful of what's going on. And are there big questions? Are there things that are unknown? Absolutely. And some of those are actually really fun to sit on the cusp of the unknown and see that the extents of the mystery that is yet to be discovered and known is a beautiful position to be in, recognizing that there will be brokenness, that I'm called to step into that and to help as I can and as God equips me, but to also recognize that there's real hope for the future, that there is a real restoration, and then that posture of hope gives me a real peace in this moment that should allow me as a Christian to be clear-minded and level-headed and be in step with the Spirit of God as he has what he has for each of us to do in the upcoming days.